All right, welcome everyone. Welcome back to the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program certification class. Thank you for your patience. A little technical difficulty. We've made it through it, and we're going to move forward. So all of you that are with us live, thank you for coming. Those of you that are watching via the internet, Facebook, once again, thank you for joining us. And also remember, just to remind everyone, because we still get a lot of questions asking about the book, you can download the book free. It's there on the Facebook page that you're watching on if you're on the internet. So anyone can go there and you can download a copy, and it's a teacher's manual free of charge for your use in going through these classes so that you can be in line with what we're teaching here. It's really important to not just have a book, but also to be putting your notes in the book. And you don't know how valuable that is until you've went through a class, and no matter who's teaching, even if you're a teacher in these classes, you still go through the classes and you're taking notes from other teachers. And when you go and you teach a classroom in a school, all of these notes are here before you. And it really helps because we're going to rehearse a little bit what David covered about setting your mind in advance, because that's what these notes actually do for us. Because remember, the very first thing that we said about covering lessons in the Peaceful Solution, the teachers are supposed to go over these lesson plans in advance. And that's setting our mind in advance for what we're going to do, what we're going to cover, and the things that we're going to address. And looking back over to page 80, David was telling us, and these are very important as we move forward, because we're going to possibly get, I don't know if we'll get this far looking into a word, but there's a word we're going to get into that the majority of schools will slip up on this word. And even teachers in the schools actually slip up on this word. And if we get to it, I'll let you know. If not, the next teacher will let you know about it because we've experienced it a lot. But the things we have to remember, looking back on page 80, and of course it says, have you ever heard the saying, it's all in your head? Most people say it sarcastically, but there's some truth to it. Whether you are aware of it or not, and if you don't have this underlined or highlighted, please do so. Every action begins with a thought. Every action begins with a thought. And in society today, most people will say that, but they won't really use it. It's kind of randomly spoken. But when they start defining words, and we'll get to that word hopefully tonight, they'll actually exclude this with, oh, I wasn't thinking. Well, we're always thinking, and every action begins with a thought. And remember, David read to us that setting our mind in advance to maintain our positive character traits begins first by considering just how important it is to have a moral character. And that's something we have to consider. That's our thought process. And remember, we're weighing our options, and then we're building. We're building positive character. We're molding it's better said, we're allowing ourselves to be molded. Whenever we're teaching, then we're part of the molders that are molding character. But teachers set in classes. Teachers are students first. And as teachers going through this class, that's one thing that we have to realize. We're always going to be students. Even if we're teachers, we're still students. So to mold others, we have to allow ourselves to be molded also. And that's just being said so we can set our mind in advance for that. But also looking down to the next paragraph, you see it said, the next step is to make up your mind not to be influenced to do anything that will compromise your character. That's much easier said than done, especially when the influence comes from people who you care about, people you know, people you're close to. But notice it says here, in other words, determine in your mind that no one, underline that word, no one can talk you into doing something you know is wrong. Now remember, when you know it's wrong, you have the power to make a right choice because you have the knowledge to do so. Now, if you didn't know it was wrong and you do it, well, you're going to have a consequence that comes. But after the consequence comes, then you kind of realize, well, it's not something I should be doing. You really want to have the power to make a choice, the knowledge to make a choice before it's too late. And once again, notice this is called setting your mind in advance. Now, continuing on here, watch your thoughts, moving down a little bit. The very first paragraph here, it says a very critical aspect of maintaining your positive character. Notice being aware of your thoughts. So every action begins with a thought and being aware of our thoughts. So we'll get into self-talk and how it's positive thoughts and cool thoughts later in the program, but it's very important that we realize you're not crazy if you're talking to yourself about a decision. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, we all do it. We might not like to admit we talk to ourselves, but we all do it. That's actually a positive thing. And when I say talk to ourselves, it's contemplating. Should I do it? Should I not? What's the benefits? What's not the benefits? And when you can't answer those questions, as we teach our students, then that's when it's time to go seek a teacher, a counselor, a trusted adult who can help guide you in that. Whenever you can ask yourself, should I or should I not? Well, I don't know. That's when it's time to seek an outside source and to get some guidance. But notice it said thoughts run through your mind. Thoughts continuously run through your mind, which are significant in controlling your actions and decisions. And sometimes these thoughts, as David was saying, could come at us 100 miles an hour. And sometimes it's just coming along. Well, we're going to get through some of those tonight, talking about how, the stress of everyday life that's added to it. And when you think of students today, think of the students. I went to school and I never experienced being set out or social distancing or anything like that in school. Well, students today are virtual learners, or their classrooms are really reduced because of the COVID virus or the pandemic going through. And that's made a lot of changes. And they're saying the effects, it's not that virtual learning can't be done. We've been doing it for years in the Peaceful Solution, and we've found great success. It's a vast change for people. And when you first do it, you have to kind of adapt to it. And that's one thing that it's getting our mindset that the way we've been doing it, we're just not going to get to do it right now. You got to set your mind in advance for that too. But you always have to seek the positive. What is the goal at hand? And we'll get into more of that tonight also. But notice also it said some people become angrier and angrier by perpetuating negative thoughts about the person and situation. Now, what we're going to get into tonight is this self-talk. If we find ourselves talking, if we find ourselves saying, if we find ourselves doing things that are derogatory, tearing somebody down, we can create, and I think most of us have experienced this, to where you're going into a situation or a situation has arose, and you start creating the outcome in your mind. And you can create a really negative situation, like, well, when I see that person, I tell you what, the first word they say, I'm going to let them have it. Well, that's setting your mind in advance, but that's not the peaceful solution. And a lot of times you can go into a situation and you walk away going, hey, it wasn't anything like I thought. Nothing bad that I thought was going to take place actually took place. And that should be humbling experiences for us, because setting our mind in advance, we're talking about to make positive choices. Not setting your mind in advance to retaliate, not setting your mind in advance to blame someone else. There's certain things that we do, because we're going to get into curveballs and pitfalls. And there's certain things that we do we like to pass the blame on. When you go to the grocery store, you have to set your mind in advance. You make a grocery list of what you're going to buy. You at least have an idea that you're going to buy something when you go into a grocery store. So you've set your mind in advance, you're going to buy something. Now, if you become overweight, that's not the grocery store's fault. That's like they like to say McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's and Kentucky Fried Chicken and Pizza Hut. These places are causing obesity. They're causing you to be overweight. I'm overweight, and I haven't been to one of those places in 20 plus years. So I can't blame them. I can blame myself, but I can't blame them. I can blame the person that cooks for me, but it's not true. I'm the one sticking it in my mouth. But we also think about other things we set our mind in advance to do. When you go to bed at night, you set your alarm to get up. Why? You want to be responsible. You want to be where you're supposed to be at the right time. Searching the internet. When you go on the internet, don't you usually have something you want to look for? And those choices, once you have Google or Yahoo or whatever browser you're going to use and you're going to search, those thoughts are already in your mind, what you're going to search. And what you've been taught and the basic morality of right and wrong will determine where it leads you. And when you get to where you're going, who do you have to blame if you search something that is negative or demoralizing or get you in trouble? Who do you have to blame? It's yourself. You can't say, well, so-and-so made me do it. Did so-and-so come type it in on your computer? No. We have to look at the things that this teaching that we're putting into the minds of our children, setting their mind in advance, helping them to be able to make right and proper decisions, that curveball or pitfall is going to come. If you want to be turning over to page 85, because that was what David was really getting at. The meat of it was setting our mind in advance to make a decision. When we train our children, when we're training our students, a lot of times we're literally training them for a life or death decision without even knowing it. Teaching them about drunk driving, how you shouldn't do it, teaching them the dangers of drugs, and we'll even get into bad scenes, as the Peaceful Solution addresses, that make life-altering decision, or the choices will make life-altering actions or cause life-altering things to take place in someone's life. In fact, you can get, as we've heard one teacher say down in Laredo, Texas, some students get the gift that keeps on giving, and they have to live the rest of their life with it. And we think that, well, not that many. Yes, that many do. That many do. In fact, think about this while we're looking here at curveballs and pitfalls. And of course, we're going to read Procedure 5 first, but keep your finger there on page 85. And I want to read this to you. Keep this in your mind because we're going to rehearse. And if you remember what bad scenes are, we'll turn back to it later, but have this in your mind. It says, and this is in the United States alone, almost 1,700 teenage girls get pregnant every single day. That's 70 girls every hour. 70 girls every hour. And roughly 82% of teenage pregnancies aren't planned, which means they're most likely not married. It's just something that's took place through making bad choices. And unplanned pregnancies usually lead to more bad choices. And that's what we want to think about tonight, these bad scenes and the curveballs and pitfalls that allow us to get there. So have your finger on page 85 and look back over to LP4D. That's the lesson plan. Lesson plan 4, and that's page D. And we're going to be on procedure 5. And this is what we need to do. This is the Peaceful Solution, setting our mind in advance to what we're going to do with our students. It says, tell students that there will be many unexpected situations that can arise. Without mental preparation, can catch them off guard. Have students read the section found on page 85 entitled Curveballs and Pitfalls, and then do the exercise on pages 86 and 87 entitled Don't Be Caught Unprepared. Emphasize that it is not always easy to maintain a positive moral character. And that's one thing that is very important that we get into the minds of our students, because we as adults know the very same thing. It's not easy to always make the right choice. It takes a lot of hard work. But there's things we set our mind in advance for every day as adults. When we're driving down the road and the light turns yellow, what does that set your mind in advance for? Stop. Most people say speed up when we teach out in schools. Students that don't drive, you'd be amazed how many go speed up. No, you don't speed up. That's slow down. Stoplight's getting ready to take place. So you got to set your mind in advance to keep the rules. Keeping the rules help you. If you think that a yellow light means to speed up, well, that can bring harm because that's not necessarily the rule. And it's not the rule in that. So on page 85, looking over to curveballs and pitfalls, we start out by saying curveballs and pitfalls are unexpected situations. Notice that can test your resolve to maintain a positive character. So these are things that you don't plan for, but they take place. Something unexpected. Like somebody going through the yellow light, trying to get through it really fast, and you're trying to come the other way. Now, they can come when you least expect them and can catch you off guard. Now, remember we talked about in becoming a VIP, how we practice so it becomes a habit, so it becomes a part of us. So our decision-making takes place because thoughts do move very fast. For instance, let's say you're nailing a nail with a hammer and you hit your finger. You could throw the hammer, and you could also throw the hammer and say a couple curse words while you do it. But you could also lay the hammer down and just kind of realize what's done and examine the situation. Because throwing the hammer doesn't make the finger stop hurting. And cussing won't make the finger stop hurting either. But we tell ourselves, well, I felt better because I did it. Not really. It still hurts. It didn't help at all. You know, it's like telling yourself, if you've ever been to the dentist, when they pull, it's just not going to hurt. I'm going to set my mind, it's not going to hurt. No, it's going to hurt. You know, set realistic goals. And in these situations right here with curveballs and pitfalls, they're going to come up when we least expect them. They're going to arise. We're going to encounter them. You're not going to be able to say, well, I'm going to set my mind in advance so much, I'll avoid all of them. It's not possible. It's part of everyday life. We can't plan for everything. As one teacher said, you cannot say what you're going to do tomorrow. We don't have that ability we can plan a schedule, but we can't make sure that we're going to adhere to it until we've actually appeared and done what we need to do. Well, with these curveballs and pitfalls, notice back here on page 85, it says, suddenly you can find yourself in the middle of a bad scene. Now, think about what a bad scene is. You can go back over to page 1. Page 1, because the Peaceful Solution started out talking about bad scenes. And at the very bottom of page 1, you see a few sad facts of life. And notice it said that in a way it's sad that we live in a society that puts so much emphasis on what people look like on the outside. You know, whether they're popular, pretty, cute, athletic, tall, short, or fat, as if those are the things that really matter. It's even sadder that we sometimes feel forced to spend so much time fixing, molding, and changing our outer appearance, the way we dress, speak, and walk, just to fit in to be like everyone else. All of these things kind of prevent you setting your mind in advance. You're too busy trying to do things to fit into society, but that doesn't mean society is necessarily doing what's right. We're showing how when our minds get off of really going over and practicing moral character, getting our minds trained properly and making right decisions, we get pulled off with being worried about things that really have no value. Now, someone might deem it to be important to themselves that they have the latest fashion, they buy the nicest cars, the latest cars, or they have the nicest this or the nicest that. But those things really don't determine whether you're a moral person or not, whether you're honest or not. You know, it's like when you set your mind in advance, the latest, greatest new vehicle just come out and I'm going to go get it. And it's all going well until the first payment comes due. And it's like, how much? I got to pay what? And then your insurance comes due. Oh, it sounded great until I had to pay for it. You know, this is what the Peaceful Solution does. It helps us set our mind in advance to make right decisions. And when you're young, everybody wants a new car. Everybody wants the latest thing. But the reality of how much hard work it takes to be able to accomplish that hasn't been instilled in the mind of, I would say most. I wouldn't say it all, but most young people don't have that instilled in their mind yet. They haven't developed the knowledge of what it takes to work for something, especially something that expensive. Well, notice back here it says the saddest fact of all, because we're getting into these bad scenes, the saddest fact of all is in the long run, changing the outside just to fit in without improving who we are on the inside has caused many disappointments, lost friendships, and notice created bad scenes. And those bad scenes, in case you're wondering what a bad scene is, it's the 1 million pregnancies a year, the 25,000 teens who are diagnosed with HIV. You know, in 2018, CDC updated that to 37,832. And it's important to remember that is reported cases. CDC says 1 out of every 7 people have no idea they need to be tested for HIV. But when COVID comes along, every other virus or infection seems to play second to it. But HIV hasn't disappeared and it doesn't go away. Neither do the other many STDs that can be contracted in a person's life through making bad choices. Because with pregnancy and HIV come a whole lot of other diseases. And remember, we talked about the 20 million new STDs every year, and half of those are teenagers that are contracting these things. Those are really bad scenes, especially imagine And always keep in mind when you say this, we brought this before because you're going to have people that are going through it. But imagine if you personally contracted an STD at 13 years of age. One that's going to stick with you through the rest of your life. How would you feel? You would feel like someone cheated you. Someone should have told me. Why didn't no one warn me? Well, that's what our jobs are to do. A lot of people will think, well, you shouldn't be talking to children about these things. Warning them that there's dangers out there. If you want to be a moral educator, if you want to be a positive teacher, warn that there's dangers and guide them to not make bad choices. That doesn't mean you have to become a pervert. Doesn't mean you have to say things that are inappropriate. But it does mean, hey, there's danger here. Set your mind in advance. If you do this, this could take place with you. In fact, it's taking place with a lot of people, so beware. Nothing wrong with that. It's putting a thought in someone's mind. Well, continuing on here, it says there are thousands more who die in drunk driving accidents and hundreds of thousands of teenagers who have to suffer through, notice, the divorce of their parents. And then looking over to page 2, of course, we go over that once again. And it says, remember, here's what it boils down to. You don't have to go this route. It says you can take the road less traveled. That's the positive moral road. That's the road the Peaceful Solution is offering. It says now it might not be the most popular road or the road that your friends are taking, but here's another fact. Life is about making choices. That is extremely important when we're talking about setting our mind in advance, because it's to make a choice. And when these curveballs and pitfalls come and we make bad choices, even though it might be a natural thing to, it's so-and-so's fault that I did this. We really have to consider, as parents, I'm a parent, when someone comes and says your child did something wrong, it's natural to go, well, they must have learned that somewhere else. No, they can learn that stuff from home. We don't give ourselves enough credit sometimes for the things that we allow to be instilled, or we ourselves instill them into the mind of our children. So we have to be responsible and set our minds as teachers and parents that the choices that the children make or our students make, we can't control them, but we want to continually put thoughts into their mind because there's always negative thoughts coming to their minds. Society will offer, for every positive thing you say, you can get 10 negative things said in the next 5 minutes. So it's kind of a competition, but if a student knows that this could take my life, this could change my life, this could destroy my life, that sets in their mind. That causes them to beware. Doesn't mean someone else won't come along and say, who told you that? I've done this for years. I'm just fine. I'm healthy. I'm fine. What is that? Oh, it's medication I got to take every now and then. Well, and I'm not condemning or speaking down about medication, but think about this. If you're someone that takes a medication, nothing wrong. If you have to take them by all means. But if you had the opportunity to go back and say, this choice right here led to why I take medication today, what would you do? Would you go back, if you had the power to go back and change that? If someone gave you the knowledge to do it, would you make a different choice? Well, that's what we're trying to save children from is we've all made bad choices. We're trying to help limit the children that we're teaching, the adults that we're teaching. We're trying to help them limit their bad choices also. And it's hard work, as we said. But once again, life is about making choices. We can't avoid that. Continuing on, it says the choices you make, the ones that could save your life, and yes, this is life or death, will be based on your development of a positive character. So we have to bear that responsibility ourselves. We can't be blaming other people. And the only way to develop a positive character is to start paying attention to what's going on the inside. And think of that inside right now as kind of between these ears, from the top of your head to your chin, because that's a database. A lot of people would like to say that's where thoughts come from, but we're going to call it a database. That's where we record them. And if you could think about that, we record thoughts and we have a memory there. So with all that in mind, go back over to page 85. Life is about choices. We have to set our mind in advance for these choices. We have to be responsible for these choices. But we want to make sure that we limit bad choices, avoid them as much as possible. We definitely want to avoid bad scenes. There's no reason you don't accidentally get pregnant. You don't accidentally overdose on drugs, even though they say accidental overdose. Well, he got a hold of some bad drugs. Is there any such thing as a good drug? When you're out and you're doing illicit, illegal drugs, they're all bad. We've dealt with people that deal with drug enforcement at the border with most of the drugs come across. And that was one of the things that an officer said one time. He goes, I always laugh when they say he got a hold of bad drugs and he overdosed. He said, they're all bad. The way they say that, it makes it sound like some of them are okay. Some of them are beneficial. None of them are beneficial. So we have to be mindful, because think about if you put that in the mind of a student. Well, so-and-so overdosed the other day, and I've had a family member overdose just in the last 2 months. One I haven't spoke to in a long time, but I noticed that they said in the report that he got a hold of some bad drugs. And the first thing that came to my mind was there's no such thing as a good drug. Drugs are bad. All of them are bad. But if you say that, say in front of 13-year-olds, 12-year-olds that really don't know the difference, that, bad drugs kill. Yeah, well, what's a bad drug? Well, he got a hold of some stuff that wasn't made right. It's never made right. So, we want to make sure when we come across to our students that you have to be honest with them. You don't want to be the person that says, drugs will kill you and they can destroy your life. Trust me, I did cocaine for 40 years. I'll tell you something that stuck in my mind when I was in high school. They got all of the students, which were about 1,100 students, to the gym. And there was a guy that was going to talk to us, a man that was going to talk to us. And he started out by sticking a handkerchief up this side of his nose. And then he pulled it out the other side. And we were all looking like, what in the world is this going to be? And he was telling us how cocaine had destroyed the inner part of his nose. It's not there anymore. It totally destroyed it. And how much it had ruined his life. And one thing I always remembered, he didn't have anything positive to say about doing drugs. Nothing. You didn't leave that presentation thinking, well, he said this was okay. He had nothing positive to say. But I never forgot that. Ever forgot. And every time I hear the word cocaine, that comes back to my mind. That situation, because as the man said at the end, everything I broke, I cannot fix. Everything I've destroyed cannot be replaced. But it was his choice. And I remember how he went in, that he made some bad decisions. Somebody offered him something, but he chose to do it. So continuing on here, looking down at the second paragraph on page 85, it says, another important part of maintaining your character is being ready to forgive people who have hurt you or disappointed you. And think about when we do things. There's an old saying I heard a teacher, in fact, I've heard the author of The Peaceful Solution mention it before. It's never right to kick a man in the ribs when he already knows he's down and hurt. When he's down and hurt, that's when you help him up. You don't kick him again, you help him. And that's very important, because when we do something to someone, and we realize that we've done something wrong, and we feel bad about it, we want that person to forgive us, but then how do we treat the people that do things wrong to us? How do we as teachers, if our students do something wrong, how do we treat them? We expect them to give us respect. We deserve respect, and so do the students. And that's one thing that kind of escapes people in the schools, teachers in the schools. Students must respect me first. That's what we hear a lot. They must respect me first. Who's keeping score of this? And how much of a curveball and a pitfall does it put in front of a student, as I've heard William talk about, David talk about, Catan talk about, when we went into schools, and you'll see character programs with their billboards, their posters, respect. You have to give it to get it. Well, that's a curveball and a pitfall that we've just put in the mind of a child. We've just told them that people have to earn your respect. So being forgiven of someone is something that we have to set our minds to do. If someone does something that's wrong to us, we need to prepare our minds in advance. If something's wrong, consider what's wrong and then address it. And addressing it is like hitting your finger with a hammer, going and yelling at them and screaming at them, or throwing things at them, or swearing at them, or calling them up and telling them your side of the story and hanging up and slamming the phone down. That's not forgiving someone. And how would we feel if we were done that way? Now, that doesn't mean that you should call them up immediately, because sometimes it's, hey, can I talk to you? Well, just give me some time. Call me back in an hour. Nothing wrong with that. But we have to set our minds in advance to forgive people, because we want to be forgiven. And we've all been disappointed with others, and others have been disappointed with us. That's just a fact. Now, continuing on, it says, without forgiveness, you can become hateful and try to get revenge on that person. If you don't know how much this is in society, there's a news channel that's been around for years, and they have multiple channels now. One channel, after the morning news goes off on the cable networks, the rest of the day and all night is on forensic shows, how people murdered people who wanted revenge. It literally takes up hours and hours and hours of television. And there's a different episode on every hour, every day. And it goes for, and these are just the ones they've made shows about. These are people that have, they want revenge. They have hatred in their heart for someone else. They're not looking, they don't have this positivity. But one thing, I actually watched a couple of them because I wanted to see what leads to this stuff. And one thing you see, they're always in a situation they should have never been in to begin with. There was a lot of immorality that led to the situation that caused someone to die. But notice it says, when people seek revenge, usually the people they hurt most are themselves. And that's one thing that we have to realize, that when we hurt someone, as we've talked about it in the class before, sometimes aluminum foil is what we take the most. If we forget the aluminum foil, we'll just grab a piece of paper and we'll do this with it. And we'll ball it up and throw it out to a student. It's coming, catch it. And we'll have the student say, I only throw it to the teacher that does this the most when we're in the schools. But I tell you, it seems like a small thing, and we'll say, now, get that piece of paper, you've got the rest of the class. Make it nice and smooth and get it back to the way it was before I wadded it up. Aluminum foil works a lot better because it's just impossible. You'll see the students just, But the paper, they'll actually spend time with. They'll take their pencil, they'll get it on the desk, and William, who I threw that to, he's used this example a lot. And you'll see students, as the students trying to get it out, they're all kind of watching, and they get the point. There's no way you're going to get that back out. And it's with the way words come from our mouth. We all want people to forgive us. And let's read this and we'll get into the next comment. It says, forgiving others for their wrongdoing might not be the easiest thing to do, but it's definitely worth it because it can help you maintain your positive character. Whenever a situation occurs, especially to people that we know or that are close to us, the ones we say we love, whenever we react harshly in a situation where we should be forgiving them, the sad part about it is we can do a lot of harsh things and then we forgive them. But you can't take back all the harsh things that we did. It's easier to just forgive and not build up the harsh things. And that's easier said than done too. Because one thing that we've programmed ourselves with, when our feelings get hurt, we want people to know our feelings got hurt. And we want to make sure they know how bad our feelings got hurt. Well, that starts with, remember, controlling your thoughts leads to controlling your emotions. Or better said, controlling our thoughts leads to controlling our emotions. But notice it says it will get easier each time you practice. And remember, practice, practice, practice to become a VIP. Now it says the first step in handling curveballs and pitfalls is to plan for them. You have already learned the value of setting your mind in advance. Now, that doesn't mean today's just going to be a bad day. That's not what it's saying. How to make it a positive day. I remember I went into work one day, and I had my mind set. Everything was going to be great. And then a sewing machine broke. And, machines break all the time. You can blame a person if you want to, but the machine breaks. And usually it's not the person that breaks it. It's just something goes wrong. And here I flip the power on, I flip it off, I flip it on, I flip it off. And I'm getting my fingers in there working with the bobbin casing and the needle, and it has a pressure foot that comes down. And I know I've been working around sewing machines for 35 years. If I hit the pedal when the power's on, the needle's going to come down. Probably shouldn't have your finger in it. Well, I'm working on it. For some reason, I thought it was smart to hit the pedal. And then after the needle went through my finger and the pressure foot went down, and it was the most painful thing I've ever experienced, I thought it was smart to jerk my finger back. And then when I look and realize part of my finger is still hanging in the sewing machine, I realized today's going to be a really bad day. But I'm the one that made my day a really bad day. I wanted to blame someone else. I looked at the person that used the sewing machine, and I thought, well, no, I can't blame them for my ignorance. But I tell you, that was painful. And the first thing that came to my mind was the machine shouldn't have been broke to begin with. Well, this still had nothing to do with me because I got it working again because it went through my finger just fine. But that wasn't the way to do it. But naturally, through pride, through not wanting to acknowledge, I did that to myself. We can do a lot of things to ourselves. We can put ourselves in some really bad situations, and we create them. We don't need any help. Kind of like blaming McDonald's for getting fat. No, you don't really need any help. You have to control that yourself. It just feels better to blame someone else, is what society teaches, but it doesn't solve problems, and it really doesn't cause someone to feel better. It doesn't cause problems. You're not going to be able, as David said last week, or last class, when you make a right choice, won't be no ice cream for you if you're blaming other people. As he said, go reward yourself with an ice cream. Well, you can't reward yourself if we're blaming other people. But if you solve a problem, accept the responsibility, get through it without destroying, without tearing people down, then we've solved a problem. And it's very important because when you see children in hallways, if you went to high school, you've seen high school fights. That didn't solve problems. And I remember seeing fights, and the next week they'd be walking hand in hand together. They'd become friends. What were y'all fighting about? I don't remember. If you've got brothers or sisters when you grew up with them, fight, then all of a sudden one day it's just not worth fighting for no more. Well, why were you fighting to begin with? I don't remember. I really don't remember. It wasn't important. But it sure seems important at that time. Well, we're trying to get our minds set in advance when these situations that come we don't agree with, that we handle them properly. And once again, the first step is planning for them. Now, continuing on here in the third paragraph, it says, you can imagine some of the unexpected situations that you might encounter and plan practical ways to deal with them. This is called hypothetical reasoning. So we're running things through our mind. We're if this occurs, I'll do this. If this takes place, I'll do that. With the COVID virus, think about all of the things. The winter we just experienced here in Texas. A lot of us didn't have water. My business didn't have power for the whole week. When you have a business, the bills still come in. You still got to pay your overhead. You just don't make any money, so you lose all of that throughout the week. I could went and looked at my faucet, and I could have screamed at my faucet, hit my faucet, jerked my faucet. There's still no water going to come from my faucet. The right thing to do was to figure, well, what's the problem? And there were a lot of people helping solve these problems. A lot of people working long hours that set their mind in advance to do things because we knew this was coming. And then one night I wake up and it's really cold. I'm out of propane. And I go outside and my propane, and this is a true story, my propane tank's at 5%. And I literally called it a liar. I said, you lied. You don't have 5%. You have nothing. And I'm sitting here arguing with a propane tank. And after I do it, I'm looking around like, I sure hope nobody sees me doing this. Now that I tell everybody what I did. But that was part of me is like, well, no, you should have planned for this. We knew it was coming. We knew it was going to be cold. So these are things that, these hypothetical reasoning that we do, well, when problems arise, when something's going to take place that could take place, that you see that it could be coming, we got to set our minds for it. We got to ready ourselves for things that can be destructive, be hurtful. So in other words, what are some typical situations that are likely to occur? Think about that. What are some things in your life? A lot of us live here in Texas, so we all went through not having water and being extremely cold, minus 20 degrees with wind. People up north, they kind of laugh at us. That's every day. And as I told the person that said, listen, I live in Wisconsin. I go through this every day. And I said, I noticed you moved. You're not there anymore. And I'm sure you moved for a reason. I personally couldn't handle the cold. I'm not a cold guy. I don't like it, but I know it's necessary. And we have to find ways to enjoy it. So, but think about things in your life. What are some typical things? And then what could you say or do that will help you to maintain your positive character? And right now, if you're thinking about these things, you're talking to yourself in your head. You're setting your mind in advance on what you could do. But notice this says maintaining your character here in the last paragraph will require maintaining your character will sometimes require courage. And if you don't have that noted, you can make a line under it and put page 29, because that's where the Peaceful Solution gave us the definition of courage, because being courageous means we have to get through sometimes something we fear. And on page 29, the word courageous, it says the act of doing what needs to be done even when you're afraid. Even when you're afraid to do it. Now, that doesn't mean, well, I'm afraid to go 100 miles an hour, but I'm going to do it. No, we're talking about standing up for what is right, morally right. You would be courageous if someone says, will your car go 100 miles an hour? Well, it might, but I'm not going to do it. Well, mine will. That's great. I'm not going to do it. Being courageous is standing up for doing what's right. Even if someone calls you chicken, calls you names, puts you down, you're still a courageous person when you do the right thing. So back to page 85, it says, having knowledge, wisdom, and a plan will give you the confidence you need to stand your ground. And if you don't have it written there, write down where it says having knowledge, wisdom, and a plan. Draw a line over to the side and it says, and just put having the power to make the right choice. Because knowledge and wisdom and a plan, that gives you the power. You can know something's hurtful and still do it. But when you form a plan, you have the knowledge, you have the wisdom, and you have the understanding. You understand what you need to do, and that's your plan. You can have all the knowledge in the world, knowing that driving fast, people die, doing drugs, people die, making bad choices are very bad, stealing things lead people to prison. You can know these things, but that doesn't mean that you'll plan for them. Planning to get caught is not a great thing. Planning to do the right thing is what we're talking about. But notice you have the confidence you need to stand your ground. And stand your ground doesn't mean an argumentation. It means standing your ground to not give in to the curveballs and the pitfalls. This is talking about you as an individual doing the right thing. Notice it says, don't be discouraged if you find yourself in a situation where you are the only one trying to do what is right. Sometimes it might seem that way, but there's other people around that if you'll just watch people make decisions, other people want to do the right things too. Just some people don't have the tools that the Peaceful Solution teaches. Some students might not have those tools, so they're easier influenced to do those things. But one person standing up to do the right thing can cause others that don't have these tools to do the right thing. You yourself, remember, you have the power of influence also. But remember, you must stand up for what is right, or you can fall for anything. And that's very, very important. Remember what the author of the Peaceful Solution told us, 2 wrongs don't make a right. But how many times in our lives have we thought, somebody did me wrong? As the old saying, and I would say that you don't say this in schools, but I've heard this in a lot of schools. As I heard one teacher look at a student in Houston and say, payback's hell. And I thought, man, I would not want to be in this class or in this school. This is a war going on here. You know, and this is the same school where two students that were girls were fighting as we were leaving the school, and the security guard went to break it up, so they both beat him up, and then they went back to beating each other up. And we had a lot of students with us, and their mouths were dropped to the ground. But you know what? The principal was coming out and saying, oh, please tell them I'm sorry. We're not really like this. Well, this is why we need this program. And we understood. She was the one that was begging for the peaceful solution to be taught. She's seen there was a problem. And she was begging for the program to be taught because she knew what was taking place. But standing up for what is right, I will fall for anything. So be prepared by making full use of what you've learned. What you've learned. That gives you the knowledge. That gives you the power. The Peaceful Solution Character Education classes. What we've learned in these classes. Preparation will enable you to avoid the curveballs and the pitfalls of life. Or notice, bad choices lead to bad consequences. You can never do something that's wrong and expect to get something that's right. It just doesn't work that way. It's like, where'd you get that nice new bike? I stole it. Oh, it's yours now? Oh, it's mine. It's mine. That's right. And then the cops come by and, where did you get that bike from? Just showed up. You know, because whenever a person steals, and the reason I bring this up, because think about the curveballs and the pitfalls when we make one bad choice. When someone steals something, that's being dishonest. Whenever someone asks them where they got it, what do they usually do? Lie. Why did they lie? Well, they know what they did was wrong. They had the knowledge. They just didn't have the wisdom or the plan to go with it. They didn't have those other parts to put it together. Well, looking over to page 86 and 87, we're going to cover this, try to get through this the last part in the class tonight. It's a little exam for ourselves, and this is something you have to do individually. Your students have to do it. And once again, I stress, never ask your students to be honest with yourselves when you do this, and then expect them to read it out in front of everybody. Because there can be some really negative things that when we're honest with ourselves, we're going to find negative things. We're going to find things that we need to fix, we need to work on, and that doesn't mean that we want to go brag about them to everybody. We just need to identify the things that are wrong and work on them ourselves. And if they're going to share things that are wrong, that needs to be with a guidance counselor or a trusted adult, not with the whole classroom to kind of tell what their shortcomings are. But notice here it says, read the following scenarios. Then write on the lines provided what your positive character response would be. Planning in advance what you can say or do will prepare you for the curveballs and the pitfalls that might come your way. Now you read that and you might think, well, what could be negative? Sometimes people think negative things are the right way to deal with things. And that's why I say be careful, because some people, we've had classes where if someone come and called you a name, what would you do? Punch them in the mouth? Well, that's not the right thing to do, you know, and that's not something, obviously that person needs a little bit more education, you know, and I've heard people say, well, my father told me someone beats me up, he's going to beat me up again when I get home. I need to learn to be a man. Well, being a man is not beating somebody up. Being a man is standing up for the right thing. Being a man can be defined as being tough, but being a man is truly defined as doing the right thing, because being a woman's actually the same definition, doing the right thing. You know, we're actually identifying gender, but we kind of stretch it out to other things. We kind of ad-lib with that. But question number one, you're invited to your friend's house for the afternoon. Your friend puts on a movie that is really inappropriate. That would be probably 99% of the movies out today. It's a very violent and sexually explicit. So that's the kind of movie that's put out. Your mom lets you watch this? You ask in disbelief. Yeah, my mom doesn't care about stuff like this. Your friend replies, well, now it's up to you. What do you say? What would you say? You know, if your friend, yeah, your mom's just hard. Your mom, they're just being hard on you. They need to let you live a little, right? Think about if this is told to one of your children and one of your children come home and, you know, you're hard on me. You don't let me do the things that I want to do. Everybody else is doing it. Think about the discord that sows in a family if we cause that to take place. Now, when you're in a classroom full of students, or you're in a gymnasium full of students, there's a lot of people that ask, what? We always kind of fill the crowd out with, what's the biggest video game going on right now? Oh, man, they'll start yelling the names out. And I haven't played a video game in I think it was Atari, so I have no idea what's out there today. But they'll call out names, and they become, you get to know the violence of them because they have little ratings on them now. Or ask, what's the latest, greatest song out today? And then we'll go look the lyrics up to see what the lyrics say. Usually some pretty bad stuff, things that you'll go to prison for if you do them. And we lose sight of that when we taught our children how to say their ABCs, we sung along with them. And now they're singing along with kill this person, shoot that person, do this to that person. They're singing along. They're educating themselves. And then when they do it, when they make the wrong choice, when these curveballs and pitfalls came their way, they did it. Well, can we blame the parent? Can we blame the teachers? Only if the parent or the teacher doesn't teach them the proper thing. But once again, it has to be put into their presence. You can't blame someone for not making a choice that's morally correct if a person's never been taught to be morally correct. So those curveballs and pitfalls, just by going through these classes, we're arming ourselves. I say arming, not bullets and guns, but we're putting on the ammunition we need to bring peace through teaching, through words. And that's the only armor really is needed for moral character. You don't need a gun, you don't need a sword, you don't need a knife, you don't need a stick to beat them hard with. Teaching is the way that it affects. It's the way that you get the thoughts into the mind. But going on to number 2 and thinking about how it can destroy a family by seeing stuff like this. You're standing in the lunch line when the class bully starts picking on the girl in front of you. He begins to call her names and makes fun of her freckles and glasses. Turning to you, he asks, "Have you ever seen anybody with so many freckles?" And think about adolescents, young people. I was picked on in school. I remember somebody picking on me, and I had an older brother come by and took up for me immediately. I didn't get picked on a lot, but I don't know anybody that didn't get picked on in school. Everybody got picked on in one way or another, especially when you're coming in as a freshman and your brother's a senior. I remember the first day of high school, the school supported this. They had a mannequin hanging from a tree. It says, "Welcome freshmen." And I thought, I was looking forward to high school. This isn't going to be fun at all. But that was actually supported by the school. And when you have somebody here, a young lady, girls think a lot about themselves. So do guys. We just don't admit it. Guys think just as much about the way they look as girls do, but we don't want to admit that. That's a manly thing again. But think about this girl, and what would your response be? How would you respond to help this girl not be treated the way she's being? And would you be afraid that, if I don't agree or kind of go along with him, he's going to say something about me too? Well, that's what being courageous is standing up for what's right. And then look down to number 3. It says, one morning as you get off the school bus, you notice a group of your friends. You walk over and they invite you to cut school with them. One friend's brother is in high school and has a car. "Come on," said the friend. "He'll take us to the mall, the arcade, and the pizza parlor." And the whole point of school is education, to learn something. And here's someone, imagine you drop your child off at the school to be picked up at the bus stop. And then you find out they're at the pizza parlor, the arcade, are doing foolish things. Well, what does that do from the parent to the child? That breaks trust. But what would you do? Would you say, "Yeah, I don't want to go to school either. I want to get out of this. I want to be out of it"? And even think of it about as an adult. Think about, you can word these things so many different ways. Say you're on a job site, and someone says, "This is the way this is supposed to be done." "Yeah, but we can do it this way too. Let's just do it this way. It's going to break if we do it that way. I do it anyway." Now, there's 2 things to that. If you have the money to do it, you should do it the right way. If finances don't allow it, then if you want water and you're trying to get a pipe together, you probably want to get the pipe together to get the water. You can always come back and add to it later. But if you knowingly have the supplies, you have the equipment, and you still do it wrong, that's when it's bad. When you have everything it takes and you still choose to do it wrong, that's when it's bad. It's like laying out of school. Look over to number 8. We're going to try to get through just a couple more of these, because once again, these are things that these work great for students, but sometimes we're speaking to adults. And this is one that number 8 is something that you'll encounter in schools. It says, your brother has a habit of using your shampoo and deodorant even though you have told him several times those don't belong to you. You realize he has used them again without asking permission first. You're upset. How do you think, and this is the sly part, because you have a brother and here he is using your deodorant, using your cologne and stuff, and then you walk by him, he's going to smell you. There's no way you can say it just got on me. I didn't take it. Well, no, you stole it. Well, these are people that you're supposed to care the most about, but they stole your stuff. Well, how would you respond? What would you say? What would you do? How would you do it? Well, once again, we can say that, as you see here, it says, what would you say? I don't appreciate you using my belongings. But honestly, if we've been through this in our lives, what did we say? I'm sure it wasn't that nice. I didn't have sisters, but I had brothers. And I know that when times like this arose, it wasn't that kind. But telling someone, don't touch my blankety blank, 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 blank ever again, you can easily say, please don't touch my stuff again. You get the same effect as far as the definition of what you said, but the words, the explicitives we put with it, that's all war. That's all aggression. That's all trying to get across our emotions without truly considering the effect of them. And then, of course, look down at number 11. This is something that can be really devastating to someone that's really trying to get their goals and their life set straight. It says, your sister spends a lot of time writing in her private diary. You wonder what she could be writing about. One evening, you go into her room to drop off some clean clothes you just folded, and you noticed her diary on the bed. And she, of course, is taking a bath. What would you do? Imagine something that personal, where someone's writing personal things about themselves, about their feelings. They're trying to share their emotions and working through things, because this is something that people have been assigned to do before. And then here comes someone that reads pretty, important things to that person. And then when that's important to that person, somebody else walks around and goes, how stupid. Who cares about things like this or like that? Well, that person did, and they have the right to care about it. So think about how when people are doing things, writing down things, their shortcomings. It's not our business to look into their phone or to look at their piece of paper. They'll have people, if they want to go get guidance counselors or tell a trusted adult, they'll work those things out. But when these things take place, what would we do if someone looked at our intimate things we're writing down? Our personal things, the things that are personal to us, and then go tell everybody else. Think of the distrust and the hurt that brings. And those are the curveballs and the pitfalls that we're faced with every day. We're going to stop right here on page 87. There's a lot of other questions you can go through, but those are things for a student to work through. I want to leave you with this one thought and this one word, and the teacher that follows up next will cover this in detail. Impulsive. Make an impulsive decision. 99% of the times we ask, what is an impulsive decision, you get the wrong answers when you're teaching in schools. Remember, we just said that every action begins with a thought. And we're going to leave it right there. Thank you all for coming. We appreciate your attention, and we look forward to joining back with you. The date will be, is it the 3rd? The next class will be, 3-3-3-3 at 5:30 p.m. Thank you very much for joining us.